at vanguardiaamerica.com and check us out there. You can also find information about us, of course, on Facebook and other major social media. Today's show, we're going to have some really interesting guests. We're going to open up with an extensive interview. After our news roundup, we'll open up with an extensive interview on the executive order by President Biden that is going to allow the spouses who are undocumented and married to U.S. citizens to apply for permanent residency on a much quicker timetable than perhaps they were able to in the past. And of course, this is the second major executive order from President Biden in just recent months in the context of immigration issues and how that's playing into the election. So we're going to be talking to a number of experts about those issues, including Petra Falcon from Promise, Arizona, Emilia Bañuelos, an immigration attorney here in town, Alex Gomez with Lucha, and Representative Lydia Hernandez, who, as I understand, her spouse would actually qualify for this status. And we'll talk to her about that and how it could affect their lives in really dramatic ways, of course. And then we'll close the show with an interview with Marcelino Quiñones, who's running for the city council in District 7, South Phoenix District. He is a recent state representative from the House at the Arizona legislature. He had represented there. District 11, and he'll be running for the Phoenix City Council, or has announced that he's running for the Phoenix City Council. So we'll get into that conversation as well. And in the future, we'll have, of course, other people who are running for that seat on the air to talk about their candidacy as well. But let's start with the news. From NBC News, as I just mentioned, President Joe Biden has taken executive action to protect undocumented spouses of American citizens, a move that should allow about 500,000 immigrants and keep them from being deported. The White House announced the election year policy on Tuesday, framing it as a quote, new action to keep families together. NBC News reported that action protecting the spouses was likely to be announced soon after urging immigration advocates and Democratic lawmakers as the president courts Latino voters in crucial battleground states. The new policy would allow non-citizens who have been in the country for at least 10 years and are married to a U.S. citizen and their children to apply for permanent residence without having to leave the country. In the past, you would often have to leave the country and then reapply essentially for entry if you were married to a U.S. citizen. During a White House ceremony, Biden called the steps, quote, common sense fix to a system that is cumbersome, risky, and separates families. He said the order would go into effect this summer, and he stressed that it would not benefit people who recently came into the country. Instead, it would help people who are paying taxes and contributing to our country and their family members. This is the biggest thing that has happened since DACA, according to one source with NBC News. The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which is commonly known as DACA, was announced by President Biden in 2012 and allowed immigrants who had come undocumented to the U.S. as children to remain in the country. And of course, hundreds of thousands of young people have benefited from that and are likely to be affected by a provision in this executive order as well. The action that was just approved by President Biden plans to allow DACA recipients who earn degrees in higher education and are seeking a job in the U.S. that same opportunity to work more quickly towards a visa. So we'll talk to some experts, as I mentioned earlier, about the impact of that. In a related story by NBC Latinos, Suzanne Gamboa, immigration advocates and Democrats say that Biden's action could help mobilize a substantial segment of the Latino vote and other voters who support protecting longtime immigrants from deportation and family separation, despite growing support among some voters for stronger border measures. The executive action is a counterweight to Biden's immigration restriction action, tightening asylum policies that was enacted earlier this month. That was heavily criticized by some, and it's been seen as a way to bring order, at least according to the president's supporters, to the border, and works as, if you will, as a counterweight on some level politically to the action that was just announced. Together, the two policies resemble the framework of previous sweeping immigration reform bills that Congress has repeatedly failed to finalize, including one measure earlier this year that was not able to gain the Republican support it needed to pass after opposition from presidential candidate and former President Donald J. Trump. Uh, Carlos Ordio, a co founder of Equus Research, a Democratic polling firm, said that in a call with reporters, the Biden's two executive actions constitute a both and approach to immigration that polling shows Americans prefer, both order at the border and then something also being done to help people who have been in the country for a long time. Oda said a recent Equus research poll of 3,569 registered voters in major swing states across the country found that 49% of non-Hispanics and 41% of Hispanics registered to vote trusted Trump more on immigration as compared to 38% and 34% respectively for Biden. The poll also showed that nearly three-quarters of respondents said that they lost that trust of Democrats on immigration because, quote, Biden and the Democrats make promises about immigration reform during the campaign but failed to deliver. Also, swing Latino voters, those whose vote could swing from one party to another, are not supporting Biden in some to some degree, and that they're more likely to support policies if he adopted them that were more stringent. The gains were higher among voters who listen to Spanish language radio media, according to Odios. Also from Suzanne Gamboa, hundreds of thousands of immigrants in the U.S. will count their blessings now as they mark the new anniversary of the program that allowed them to stay into the country after 12 years. Millions more who arrived here as children under the DACA program mentioned earlier in this report and don't qualify for this are unfortunately not going to be nearly as lucky. The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA, began 12 years ago on last Saturday. While its beneficiaries hope to have a permanent legal status in the U.S. by now, they're also celebrating at least their educations, better paying jobs, families, and homes. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who were affected by the executive order that was approved by President Barack Obama in 2012. But the commemoration, according to Gamboa, is sobered by the possibility that Republicans will succeed in their legal and political battle to end DACA. Donald Trump, who is running for president again and tried to end DACA during his last administration, of course, could be reelected and has expressed his desire to expel millions of undocumented immigrants into the country if he gets back into office. DACA recipients also recognize that they are outnumbered by more than 1 million young immigrants who could have qualified for DACA but have been denied because of Republican led battles to end it and a halt on new DACA applications. By 2025, no undocumented high school graduates will qualify for DACA because they will have entered the U.S. after the required arrival date of June 15th, 2007, according to Forward.us, a progressive group that focuses on immigration and criminal justice. Biden campaign spokesman Fabiola Rodriguez said in a statement that on day one, President Biden sent Congress a plan to provide a pathway to citizenship for Dreamers and has done everything in his power to preserve and fortify the DACA program, including expanding affordable quality health care through DACA to over 100,000 Dreamers. Fabiola Rodriguez added that Trump is promising to end DACA, separate families, and institute mass detention camps for immigrants. And that's the difference between their two policies. This story from Axios Latino on a somewhat related topic, but also on a much sadder note. The remains of at least 1,500 people who died trying to cross the southern border have not been identified, according to a new investigation by Noticias Telemundo's Ana Guilmara Vilches and Damia Bonmati. The U.S. Mexican border is considered the world's deadliest land migration route by the International Organization of Migration. Many die in the stretches of the desert where it's complicated and difficult to recover bodies, and many of them are often unidentified. There are no federal laws or a uniform way guiding authorities on how to handle these remains or repatriate them once they are identified. The Operation Identification Project that found this information, that rather gathered this information, is located at Texas State University, and it's trying to develop an identification process. On a related political note, Democrats apparently no longer hold quite the robust advantage among Latinos that they once did on immigration, according to a new poll. Latinos are increasingly identifying themselves as independents, and working class voters are leaning more towards the GOP. An estimated 36.2 million U.S. Latinos are eligible to vote in this year's 2024 presidential election. An Equus poll released on Tuesday of 1,592 registered Latino voters in 7 battleground states found 41% of Hispanic voters trust Trump on immigration as compared to 38% for Biden. So we'll be back in just a moment with our guest to talk about Biden and the recent executive order on immigration and the context of it in the upcoming political races. Thank you for joining us. I'm James Garcia.
Pendiente, mi gente. Cada lunes te presentamos una vitrina latina en el Valle del Sol. Aprendemos sobre las problemáticas y realidades de nuestros países en las Américas, su acontecer, expresiones artísticas y los recursos que están a la disposición de nuestra comunidad. Pendiente, mi gente. Lunes a las 9 de la mañana por la Onda 1190.
¿Tiene su dinero en orden? ¿No? Pues es hora. Yo soy Tomás Rivas de Marisol Federal Credit Union. Te invitamos los jueves de 3 a 4 de la tarde a tu hora de finanzas, donde vamos a hablar más de ahorros, los préstamos personales, casas, negocios y más. Te invito a que tengas una relación con tu banco. Los jueves de 3 a 4 por la Onda 1190.
¿Has intentado alcanzar el bienestar financiero, mental o físico y no lo has logrado? Soy Susana Díaz y te invito cada lunes a las 3 de la tarde a escuchar En Balance con Susana por la Onda 1190M y junto a expertos encontremos las herramientas, técnicas y métodos que nos lleven a vivir mejor. Recuerda, cada lunes a las 3 de la tarde tenemos una cita en la estación más informativa de Arizona, la 1190 AM.
Welcome back to Vanguardia America. I'm your host. This is our second segment of the show. In this segment and the next, we're going to be talking immigration, and in particular, the Biden administration's recent executive order that will affect somewhere in the range of about 500,000 undocumented immigrants living in the U.S. today, and of course, their families and their extended families and any children they may have. So we're talking potentially hundreds of thousands more by extension. And so today we have in studio with us a couple of guests and 2 people calling in. First of all, I want to identify Latino Caucus co-chair Lydia Hernandez at the Arizona House of Representatives, who is here and is going to actually be able to speak about how this might affect her in a very direct way. With regards to the provisions of this new executive order. We also have Petra Falcon, who's the executive director of Promise Arizona, which does a tremendous amount of work and has done great work on immigrants' rights issues and advocacy work for a very long time here in the Phoenix Valley and across the state, really. And then on the phone, we have with us Emilia Bañuelos, an immigration attorney, longtime immigration attorney, who's up on all of these issues and will explain to us right out of the box about how this will be impacting this community. And then Alex Gomez, who is with Lucha, a longtime advocacy organization in this community, who works not just with immigrants, but also has done a lot of work in terms of minimum wage issues and a whole range of other progressive political issues as well. So I want to thank all of my guests for joining us today. Let's go right into it. With Emilia, can you hear me? Emilia is calling in. She's on the phone with us. Can you hear me okay, Emilia?
I could hear you perfectly. Good morning. Thank
Good
you for the
morning.
invite, and it's a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us. Can you please first just lay the bare facts out of what this executive order does on behalf of so many hundreds of thousands of undocumented immigrants?
Yes, very basically. Let me go over. First of all, let me just say that, assuming that there is no lawsuits filed, against the enactment of this executive order. So basically, it would help spouses of U.S. citizens and children of U.S. citizens. And here's the basically what you could call the requirements. Number one, you had to have been married before June 18th, 2024. So if you get married now, you do not qualify for that program. You had to have been here before for 10 years. You had to present documentation that you were here for the past 10 years. Okay. And in addition to that, you also should not have any criminal or immigration history that would make you ineligible. It's based on once they get the forms, the Federal Register has to be publicized in the Federal Register. So we're thinking August, September. It gets published, and then USCIS immigration will have the forms that you need to fill out, and those forms will be filled out. There's be a filing fee. You send that into immigration, and this is the one group, right? That's obviously we think that's the biggest group that's going to be benefiting is spouses of U.S. citizens. They will be able to get what they call parole in place, which is a permission to be in the United States and not be subject to deportation. That's the biggest thing for this executive action. In addition to that, you should be able to get a work permit, and they're saying for 3 years. So that person will be able to work and remain here in the United States. And the most important thing is that person does not have to leave the country to do consular processing through Ciudad Juarez or through wherever their country in Guatemala, El Salvador. You don't have to leave the country to your appointment, to the interview, to the medical exam, and be outside the country. And then once your case is approved, then you come back. That you don't have to leave the United States, and that is a huge difference for those people who are going to be eligible for this program, because it means it's not having to be outside the country, not having to do a waiver that's taking 3 to 5 years, and just the expenses, the trauma associated with leaving your family and not knowing if you're going to come back. Of course, only those who are eligible should be leaving, but that's just the reality of what the situation. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that it also is for spouses and children being under 21 of U.S. citizens. So that is the biggest provision. It's very needed. But of course, people are saying, well, I didn't get married, or I haven't been here for 10 years, or you're not eligible for this program. And you have to do it the regular route, which is consular processing. That process still exists and will continue to exist. So people will have to do the consular processing if they're not eligible for that. But everybody who meets the three requirements should apply and should get parole in place, and that would be that's the benefit, and then apply for their adjustment of status here in the United States. Now,
Let me go,
yeah,
if I can, to the representative, because I understand Representative Hernandez that this could affect you in a very, very direct way. Is that correct? And
My husband's been in process for many, many years. And he's got a couple of other applications. It's whichever comes first because they're by category. So it's kind of complicated. It's not that simple. I think he's got somewhere along the road, he's got other questions that up until now has been settled, but even a U visa. And that began just like this. So initially it started like at 3 years and 4 years. Now it's 5 years. Now it's taking up to 6 years. So there's backlogs all over.
Could this expedite his process? I mean, do you know yet?
I am going to see. That's what I'm looking for because honestly, you can apply. He's eligible on many levels.
Okay.
It's just whichever gets that one first. I think there's been several questions along the way that've been settled that have takes time. So if there's a prior deportation, if there's something, it's just taken us that many years.
Yeah.
And right now he's still with his work permit. I want to make sure that people understand he's technically legally in the country.
Yeah.
Not legal permanent resident status.
Okay. There's obviously a nuance there. Petra Falcon with Promise Arizona. What are you hearing in the community in terms of a response to this news? Are people excited? Are they cautious? What's the news?
I think it's all of that. And back to Emilia's report, which is great. I did have a question because one of the things that I'm thinking about, if somebody does have a record and they do come forth thinking that they will qualify, it's not going to take anything in their record off for them. I mean,
Hmm.
they will not be eligible, and in fact, they're going to open themselves to scrutiny. And if they're undocumented, they're going to have to go to DHS and UCIS. And so I would just caution ourselves immediately. That was my question.
Should they get Amelia? Should they get legal representation right off the bat before they walk into an office at the federal government?
It's a scary, if you look at the notice, it does say there that if the person does not qualify, that they're going to refer them for prosecution or for additional, any type of investigation. So yeah, you better double check and make sure, triple check that that person the first thing is that you're going to file for what's called parole in place. That's not your green card. That's not that's just a something that will allow you to get a piece of paper, and that will open the door to permanent residency. So you first have to be eligible for parole in place, but you first have to make sure that you're eligible, that you're not going to get into trouble like in the past, because it says that you still have to be admissible. That the same inadmissibilities that existed that prevent people from getting their green cards now, we have some horrible laws on the books. We have the permanent bar. We have just horrible things that basically you could apply, but they've made so many exceptions and so many bad laws that very few people are eligible, and that's why they have to do
It's
consular
good to get
processing.
legal advice before you
Ver-
just decide, I'm just going to go over there and apply and start the
Yeah.
process.
Everything is going to be a case by case situation. So
Right.
again, it's just caution. But but overall, I do think it's a positive and it's a win for the immigration movement because people have been working for decades to get real immigration reform. There's still another 10 million people that need to be addressed. This is
Mhm.
only a half a million.
At least 10 million people, right? I
At
mean,
least.
yeah, that number, that so-called official number has been kind of stuck
Yeah,
for a
so
very
a
long
long,
time.
long time. So
Let me go to Alex real quick.
James,
Alex,
I would also
you,
add that people are disappointed. I think there's a lot of disappointment, and from what I'm seeing from the people is obviously, and hopefully that turns into action because people are disappointed. I was left out. I didn't get married. I didn't know whatever that may be. So a lot of people are disappointed. I think I would add that. But as advocates, I think that we will take whatever we have. We're not happy with what we have. We're not happy with this. But we take it because it would help our community. But this is not the solution. This is just another band-aid resolution, but that this is not the solution. The laws have to be changed to allow all families to be able to stay together and remain together without facing deportation.
let me, and I'm glad you made that point that this is an increment, maybe a significant step, but incremental nonetheless. Alex, you were in DC for the signing of this executive order. Is that correct? And what was the atmosphere like there in terms of those in attendance?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I was in DC, and being in DC for this show of power building from the community, because to be very clear, this was delivered because the Latino community showed this administration how important it is to deliver. And though the president can't act on a permanent solution without Congress, the president delivered an immediate relief right now for our communities. And it was incredibly important because of the fights that we have had here in state on 2060. And so shifting from the Arizona context of going back and regressing to predatory practices by police, attacks by police, right, through this bill that is an unfunded mandate that makes no sense for Arizona and is regressive for Arizona to be in the White House.
Let's let the audience know though about the bill. This is a House resolution that's now it's going to be on the ballot in November. That essentially has been described as a kind of SB 1070 point 2.0, a very draconian immigration bill. That because it was rejected by the governor, it's now going to essentially be considered by the voters in the fall. That's correct, right?
That's correct. It will be on the ballot in November for voters to vote against. And so we will be doing a lot of voter education so that our communities know. But right now, it is also under a legal challenge. And so the
Describing
reason
is
that I bring
the
that up is
context,
because
of course, of this executive order, and that context, that big picture context, has been that yes, President Biden did propose major immigration reform when he walked in the door. That was essentially dead on arrival as far as the Republicans were certainly concerned. And then beyond that, there's been, obviously this growing concern about the crisis at the border, which I describe as a humanitarian crisis more than anything. And there's been serious concerns about that on a lot of different levels. But at the same time, part of the context is that something like 70% of Americans overall want undocumented people to find some sort of path to legal residency and or citizenship. And so people are generally very much in favor of this. And so that all of that, kind of wrapped up together doesn't make the issue easy to deal with at all. Before we leave this segment, Petra, if you could give us some thoughts in terms of the political context and what this means for people who vote every day here in Arizona on these issues.
And I've been thinking about that is how important our community to go out and vote is. And I think that's what we've all have been working for a long, long time. And I think we should not just allow the politics to really almost like gift us because we're voting. We need to vote all the time for all issues, not just immigration, but also for education, housing. Our families are struggling all across the board, and it is the voice of the community that really needs to be heard all the time. So I encourage anybody who is eligible to register to vote now before July 3rd for the primary, and then think about the general. This law could be on there. This initiative, the 2060, could be. It still has some room in the courts to be killed.
Okay.
But we have
there is a challenge against it.
There's a challenge against it, but voting should always be something of our lives, and we need to teach our community and we need to teach our young people that voting is so critical all the time, not just when we're wanting something.
Yeah. When we come back to our next segment, we're going to speak more about the politics of this and really the fallout of a kind of a back and forth effort in terms of the Biden administration being tough on the border on some levels and then also trying to provide this kind of provision. So when we come back, we'll be discussing that with our guests. Thank you for joining us. I'm James Garcia, and you're listening to Vanguardia America.
Nos salimos de WhatsApp y llegamos a la radio. Todos los miércoles a las 9 de la mañana te invitamos un cafecito con noticias, recursos, entrevistas, arte, negocios, espectáculos y un piquete de buen humor. Porque el periodismo es más que información, es diálogo y complicidad. Únete a nosotros para una dosis semanal de café y charlemos, porque en Conecta Arizona tú eres nuestra inspiración. Escucha la hora del cafecito de Conecta Arizona todos los miércoles a las 9 de la mañana en la onda 1190.
Porque la información
traspasa fronteras. Somos Yasmín Islas
y Enrique Delgadillo.
Y te invitamos de lunes a viernes de 2 a 3 de la tarde
a sintonizar
Noticias sobre la Mesa.
Noticias sobre la Mesa.
Tu radio sin
fronteras.
En esa hora donde Arizona y Sonora nos hermanamos
para resaltar nuestras raíces
y nuestras costumbres, porque llevamos a México en la sangre.
De 2 a 3 de la tarde te esperamos.
Por la onda 1190 AM.
AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection presenta Hablemos de Salud, Dinero y Amor. Una conversación interactiva sobre temas relevantes para hispanos latinos. Acompáñanos los martes de 1 a 2 de la tarde por esta estación y por Facebook en AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Únete a la conversación.
Welcome back to Vanguardia America. I'm your host, James Garcia. I'd like to dive into sort of the political context of this. Let me start with you, Alex. You've been working here on the ground for a number of years on a range of issues that have been dealt with by voters. What's the context in terms of this executive order, particularly given that it hasn't been that long ago that the president also essentially approved a kind of clampdown on the border, at least as far as asylum seekers are concerned?
Yes, as I walked into the White House, and the scene was set. Before the president entered, there were significant number of community advocates, organizers that have been leading the work on immigration for a number of years. And they entered the room before the president did. And before the president spoke, they also had the testimony of a young DACA recipient that would benefit from this executive order. And to see our community grassroots advocates that have been advocating prior even to when DACA was enacted by executive order 12 years ago, to see these folks that have been in the trenches behind the president with their heads held high, you knew in that moment that this was a significant victory because not only had it been 12 years since DACA, but before then it had been 50 years since anything had been done. And so for us, this, it isn't the solution, but it is a nod to our community that the president is paying attention to the demands that the Latino community has, and that he also understands that without the Latino community, but without Arizona, there is no path to the presidential victory. And so this is a significant victory for our Latino community to feel incredibly empowered that their voices are being heard. And so what it means also is that our communities need to continue demanding, because this is one step and we need to continue fighting for permanent solutions. But the administration is paying attention.
I think that we cannot overestimate or underestimate the political clout of Latino voters these days. These are real numbers. When you talk about 35 million eligible Latino voters, and many millions of them, of course, will actually go to the polls, that counts for a lot. And yet, at the same time, there are some concerns that perhaps through misinformation or disinformation or just pounding the pavement on some level, that the Republicans are making some inroads in the Latino community. Just for historical context, Latinos have typically voted for Democrats over the decades at like a rate of about 2/3 in support of the Democrats. And that may be edging down a little. And I don't think we're even going to know how much erosion there has been until election day. But 2/3 support is tremendous support. In any other context, that's a landslide victory every time that many Latinos vote. But in an election where you have maybe a 2 or 3 point split between the candidates, and that's what the polls show right now, that President Biden is only a couple of points ahead of Mr. Trump. A few 100,000 votes here and there can mean a lot. Can you talk about that? And then I want to go to Lydia right after that.
Well, I would agree with Alex about the movement. The movement has been around. The tent was built decades ago of all the organizations across the country to fight for immigration reform. In 4 years ago, Biden only won Arizona with 10,000 votes.
Mm-hmm.
10,000 votes. And that did come from people of color communities. So and
855,000 Latinos are expected to vote in this election in Arizona. So it means something when we go to the polls.
It means something. And then part of that 85,000, there's 62,000 new immigrant voters that are going to vote as well. I mean, they're eligible to vote now. So, and they are as soon as they become a citizen, they register to vote. So that's going to be an impact. That's why my mantra is always, we need to vote every single time there's an election. There's a school board election, there's a county election. We just can't wait every 4 years to make the big push. It has to be every year that there is an election. We're electing school board members, city council members. We have a city council race coming up. So our voice has to be there every single time so that you can build, but also build that culture of voting.
Yeah,
Because
you're building a culture, and you're also building a base of candidates as well, right? Because they
Yeah,
come up through the ranks. Lydia, what's your thoughts on how well the Democratic Party is doing in terms of retaining the Latino voters in the upcoming election?
There's a lot more. There's been a shift. There's been a shift that I've noticed because even I myself, being a Democrat for many years, worked in isolation. Right now, there's at least reaching out. I
Meaning
don't
that the party didn't
that the
always reach
party,
down and talk
right?
to you.
And
Okay.
you got to be saying the right thing. So the party's looking for somebody that's going to be, repeating that rhetoric. Somebody that grew up the way I did in our barrios. I was a farm worker. I didn't come up with that rhetoric, so I don't just fall into that scheme. I think the party has a lot more work to do. You see some folks coming into the polls, but remember, you got to be saying those right things, and I don't think we've got to be those free thinkers. I don't think the party's ready for this type of leadership that knows their communities and knows what they're asking for. And the whole thing about waiting, demanding. If the numbers are the numbers, we should be at the table, not having to have to demand.
Yeah, there
And
should be
this
no question.
executive order should have been at the beginning. So
Mhm.
that's just my challenge. We need a lot more. If in fact everything's waiting on dependent on Arizona, you know what? This should have happened at the before end.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say I've long had this view that there's nothing wrong with Latinos being members of the Republican Party or the Green Party or any other party out there in addition to the Democratic Party. That's democracy as we know it. But we are in a different time, and the Republican Party is by no means the Republican Party it used to be. It is Trump's party, right? It is the MAGA party, and that particular philosophy tonally all the way through is anti-immigrant. It's an extremely virulent attitude about immigrants, whether you're Muslim or Mexican or Salvadoran or whatever, right? And so in that context, I think a lot of people are surprised that any Latinos would necessarily go, hey, I'm going to give them a shot.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm glad you touched on it because I'm going to tell you, Arizona's got to be getting ready. And I keep telling people, hey, remember, I'm saying it here that our next challenge is not just going to be whether you're Democrats or Republicans, it's going to be about we're going to have enough Latinos running within both parties, three parties. That number is growing, and I'm seeing it right now at the state legislature. We've got at least 5 Republicans in leadership, guys. That's why I'm willing to work across the aisle and work with them because they've uh, how do I put it? They've done a great job in navigating to get in terms of leadership. We have it. I think it's about us getting together and getting beyond that rhetoric, divisive rhetoric.
Yeah.
And it used to be that way. Back in the days of Burton Barr and Alfredo Gutierrez, you had Republicans and Democrats really
People
collaborating.
reaching across the aisle.
Yes, reaching across the aisle and building those strong relationships that got a lot of good work done for Arizona. But we've gotten away from that. And you described it well. The MAGA people have really just come in.
They've taken over the party. It's not their party anymore. Alex, if you have some thoughts, particularly from a somewhat younger generation that you are from, I've noticed so many young Latinos and Latinas moving up in the ranks politically here in Maricopa County and in the state and at the legislature. How much of a difference is that making in your view?
Yeah, we feel strongly, and we're going to do everything that we can. Lucha will be knocking on 1 million doors this year, and we're weighing in at the legislature, and we feel like this is the year where we're going to be able to flip at least one of the chambers. And so for us, gone are the days of bipartisanship and working across the aisle. What is clear is that the opposition are no longer, your fiscal conservative Republicans. They are passing policies saying that they are wanting to shoot immigrant communities if they come into their property, right? And so the politics now are much more visceral. They are incredibly divisive. And they are playing not only political football with the lives of our communities, which is why the president has not been able to enact a permanent solution because we don't have Congress in order to be able to vote in a permanent solution at the federal level. And so this is why it's incredibly important across the country that our communities understand the power and the magnitude of their participation, because when we participate up and down the ballot, we deliver victories like minimum wage for Arizonans. We deliver Biden, and let's be clear, Biden won by 10,000 votes, and Latinos were the margin of victory for Biden.
Easily.
And so Latinos have the power to do that again, and the president is demonstrating that he will deliver if he has Congress. So I think this is our moment to be able to demand for more. And to be able to, let's also be clear that even if Biden wins, those MAGA candidates and the MAGA movement is not going away. And so that means that our communities are going to have to band together, because the politics will get much more visceral. And our communities also need to learn how to stay engaged, stay involved, but also protect each other.
Let me close out with having Amelia round out for us again the legal context. Some closing thoughts on what immigrants who may qualify for this need to know, and that information.
I will tell you, you left the best news for last, because I've been like raising my hand here, trying to say, hey, guess what? The way that I read the executive order for, and this is not just, and this is the key word, and hopefully my interpretation of what's happening. So we already mentioned to you about the spouses of U.S. citizens and children, but the big news, in my opinion, is what it says about DACA dreamers, about creating a new employment-based immigrant visa for, and it says very clearly, for people who have higher education, who have a bachelor's degree, I believe also maybe even an associate's degree. Those people, regardless of whether they're dreamers or DACA, my interpretation, and I believe that this is going to be the right interpretation, is that it's any individual who is in the United States with a bachelor's degree will able to, and a job offer, will be able to apply for this new employment-based visa that the State Department is going to create specifically for this group. And that will lead to a green card. Not, and it says not just for, not including dreamers, including DACA, and any other. The main thing is that it says any other individuals. That's what I'm keeping my eye on, because that will open up the door for all these young, our future, to be students. If I had a message to anybody right now, if you're young, go back to school, get your associates, get your bachelor's degree, because I believe until there's immigration reform, this is the way that you're going to get your green card without having to marry a U.S. citizen or going through all the processes. Because the words are very clear in the executive order that this is any individual, including dreamers, including DACA recipients. So if you never had DACA, if you never filed, in my opinion, this could be a possibility if you have a job offer, right, to be able to get a green card through an employment-based immigrant visa, because it says a work visa first, and that requires a job offer. So to me, that's the greatest news that I've read in the executive order, because of the fact that this will lead to a green card. And so I am
So
I'm
Amelia,
happy about that. Yeah.
Amelia Vanielos, thank you so much for closing out with that really incredibly valuable information. Amelia Vanielos is an immigration attorney here in town. We've also had Alex Gomez, who leads Lucha, and Petra Falcon with Promise Arizona, and Representative Lydia Hernandez. I want to thank all of my guests for this invigorating and interesting discussion. Thank you, and we'll be back after a few moments on Vanguardia America.
Blanca Irives y John Herrera te invitan a escuchar Mi Dinero, Tu Dinero.
Hola, soy Blanca Irives y te daré información sobre impuestos, el número ITIN y todo lo relacionado con tu negocio como licencias y LLC.
¿Qué tal? Soy John Herrera, agente con licencia de seguros autorizado por el estado de Arizona. Te diré cómo proteger tu auto, casa, vida y negocio.
Los martes a las 9 de la mañana con American Family. Persigue tus sueños. Nosotros los protegeremos.
Todo Arizona está en contacto total.
¿Qué?
¿Cómo?
¿Cuándo?
¿Dónde?
¿Por qué?
¿Y hasta para qué?
Lo que usted debe saber, lo que necesita saber para estar bien informado.
De lunes a viernes a las 11 de la mañana.
Contacto total, 16 años con toda la comunidad hispana.
Muchos nos quieren imitar, hasta copiar, pero nunca igualar. Se tenía que decir y se dijo.
La información local de manera precisa, veraz y con experiencia.
Soy Daniel Aguirre. Acompáñame y empieza tu día bien informado con las noticias en las que puedes confiar. Compartimos las mismas calles, los mismos deportes y nos afectan las mismas condiciones del tiempo.
Noticias Enlace 1190 con Daniel Aguirre en la onda 1190M de lunes a viernes a las 7 de la mañana.
Welcome back to Vanguardia America. I'm your host, James Garcia. Thank you for joining us. Our closing guest for today's show is Marcelino Quiñones, an old friend. Just disclose right up front, I've known him since he was a very young man, and I wasn't. But Marcelino is running for District 7 in the Phoenix City Council. He is formerly a state representative in the Arizona legislature, and we're going to talk to him about why he left the legislature and why he's running for District 7 and what that's going to mean for the community that he represents. Welcome, Marcelino.
Thank you, James. It's wonderful to be here with you and to have an opportunity to say hello to everybody. So good morning, Phoenix. Good morning, Arizona.
So, Marcelino, let's just dive right into it. Why are you running for District 7 at this point in your life, at this point in your political career? Why is this something that's so important to you?
Sure. So there have been a number of issues that I've been really, really passionate about at the state legislature that I was able to advance. And I think that the city council presents me with an opportunity to more directly influence those issues, amongst them housing, amongst them education, and amongst them constituent services. So I think the city council presents me with an opportunity to really advance those topics while simultaneously ensuring that Phoenix continues to grow and prospers.
On housing, it's been such a sticky issue, something that has to desperately be addressed. Obviously, so many people are unhoused in our communities. I have younger children who have been trying to just get an apartment, right? I saw some numbers in the newspaper the other day that the median price for an apartment in the Phoenix is something like $2,200. That's incredible. I mean, that's like a mortgage. What could you do as a member of the city council to address that issue?
Well, I think one of the things that we have to do as a city is continue to build with neighbors' input. I also think that we should take advantage of as many federal programs as possible. One of the things that I was really passionate about at the legislature was advancing LIHTC, low-income housing tax credits. I think Phoenix needs to be a leader in those credits. Additionally, we need to look at other HUD programs to bring those resources to Phoenix. And then, James, simultaneously related to that, I think we need to do a better job in informing people about financial literacy and really preparing ourselves so that we are taking advantage of resources that our non-for-profits and other entities create. So I would create a nucleus where we would all be working together to ensure that, one, we are building with neighbor input, and then secondly, we are providing as many resources to as many people as possible so that we don't have anyone falling through the cracks.
Is housing an issue that the constituency in District 7 is talking about, and what do they say about the issue? Because it's not just rentals, of course. It's being able to purchase a home. It's all of that. What are you hearing from the people that when you start to knock on doors?
So one of the issues that we're hearing at the doors directly from neighbors is housing and the utilities and all, the cost of living being really expensive. But more than that, what we're really hearing is the number of people who are unhoused, the number of people who are without without shelter, and the sorts of conditions that that creates, and the way that every neighbor in Phoenix that I've spoken to really wants a solution to that. So again, we need to have a holistic approach to ensuring that we're providing resources to those individuals who happen to find themselves unhoused, and but that's an issue that people are really passionate about.
What else? What else do you think will? I mean, you're obviously as a member of the city council there to represent the whole city
Correct.
on a lot of different levels. But your primary constituency is District 7. What else are they saying? Hey, this is what we want you to talk about when you're up there in the dais.
Sir, sure. So just for context, District 7 includes South Phoenix, downtown Phoenix, Maryville, Estrella, and then Levine. And
So
all
very diverse, very
it's
diverse.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's a very diverse district, and so depending on where you sort of engage with your neighbors, they're all telling you different things, right? And they're all, and it's important to listen, and that's one of the things that I've always talked about as a leader. So I'm not here to tell you exactly what we're going to do. I'm here to listen, and then once we get a good sampling of what people are thinking, I can use my creativity, my insight, and my thoughts to sort of create a path. But housing is an issue. The number of folks who are unhoused is an issue.
We see a lot of them in the downtown area.
We
of
see a lot
course,
of them in the
very
downtown
sadly.
area. Absolutely, it's unfortunate. But one of the other things that's been really fascinating to me is the number of folks who are really interested in how our schools are doing. Now, as a city council member, you're not directly passing housing policy. That's something that we do at the state legislature. But one of the things that we can do is allocate resources for after school programs, is allocate resources to hire coaches, is allocate resources so that our students have a
Because you have community centers. For instance.
exactly.
Yeah.
We've got those centers. And that's one of the things that's been really exciting for me to hear is that people as a whole are really focused on the youth and making sure that our youth has a path forward. As an educator, that's something that I've constantly been advocating for, that once we give our students, our young people, a path forward, whether that be sports, whether that be culinary, whether that be travel, whatever that special area happens to be, we need to ensure that we are investing as many resources as possible so that our youth has a path forward. I think ultimately that's the long term, and then that's how we'll create the sort of Phoenix that we want to see. We have a lot of big projects here in Phoenix coming. We need to make sure that we are preparing our next generation to fill those jobs. We know that TSMC is the largest foreign investment in the United States.
TSMC is the chip manufacturer that's been opening on the west side. Yeah.
Correct. It's going to create 11,000 construction jobs. It's going to create 2,000 high-tech paying jobs. We need to make sure that we are preparing Venetians, Arizonans to take those jobs here. And I think we do that by investing right now in our youth so that we get them interested in STEM and so forth.
And speaking of the youth, the last numbers I saw are that about half of students K through 12 are Latino in the state now. I'm sure that's an even higher representation, of course, in your district, despite the fact that it includes downtown. And so, how does that factor in? I mean, you came from that community. You are of Latino origin, of course. As I understand it, it's only been a few years since you became a citizen. How does that factor in the idea that Latino youth are such a vital part of that populace?
Well, I think this is where the idea of representation is so important, right? And it's something that I've been focused on as an educator. It's something that I've been focused on uh, as an artist, as a public servant. I think this is where representation is so important. And one of the things that I'm focused on is making sure that individuals, young people that understand that, well, Marcelino took advantage of every resource that was available to him. Our public schools, our FAFSA mentorship. I'm looking at one of my mentors right now. Marcelino took advantage of all those.
South Mountain Community College, Arizona State University, etc.
Right. So my understanding of the district is I say this with modesty is pretty deep. And I've grown up there. I've lived there. I've taught there. I've worked there, and I've represented that place. And so what's important for me is for young people to see themselves in me and say, well, if that guy could do it, and how did he do it? Well, he did it by uh, taking advantage of as many resources as possible. Then that's sort of the path forward. And um, to me, that's the path that I have to sort of create as a city council member, which is Phoenix has been really kind to me. I need to make sure that we are creating those sorts of policies for others to sort of take advantage of them as well.
How do you see, and we're about to close out, we just have a couple of minutes, but how do you see yourself fitting into the formula that is the Phoenix City Council right now? Do you think you'll be a good fit with the layout of what the council makeup is now?
I think I would be a good fit because I tend to listen a lot. And I think anytime you're in a position of leadership, you need to be able to listen. You need to be able to approach the situation in a holistic manner. I think you need to be hardworking and creative and thoughtful. And so, as I look at the current body that's there, I could easily see myself working with all of them. We've got former educators. We've got the former business leaders within the council. We've got attorneys there. We've got former school board members there. So when I look at the makeup, it's a makeup that I could really interact well with.
Is there something that you bring with you from your experience at the Arizona legislature? And I believe you were on the school board before that.
I was
Roosevelt?
in the Roosevelt School District from
Roosevelt School District.
2012 through
Yeah.
16.
What has that training, for lack of a better term, how will that apply when you go to the city council? How will it help you do your job better?
I think the most important thing is that you understand that relationships are key to making all of this work. And I think, the relationships that I was able to forge at the legislature, the relationships that I was able to work with within the school board, go to show you that a lot of times the work is done, with simple conversations. It's not these grand statements. It's really more about engaging with people one on one.
Marcelino Quinones is running for District 7, Phoenix City Council. We wish you all the luck in the world and you pursue your political future. Thank you for being on Vanguardia America today.
Thank you, James.
KNV 1190M, Toleson, Phoenix.